Well, good morning, everybody. I wanted to pause because it seems like the front of my streams are getting cut off. So I'll just give a long pause before we actually get into the show today. Now, we have a few things to cover today. First, the debate from last night. Then, the school shooting threat psyop that several states had to go through over the last couple weeks. And then after that, we are going to get into a deep spiritual discussion on today's date and the event surrounding it 23 years ago. Now, today's special show is going to be loaded. We're going to be here for a while, probably a couple hours, but this will be one of the most meaningful shows on this channel. So, I guess we can start with the debate. And apparently, in this so-called democracy, we get only one debate before what we are told is the most controversial election in history. We are told that the fate of the free world rests on who becomes the next president. Knew there was going to be problems today, because there always is on the important dates. Let's see if we can try to work this out here live. And let's see here. Let's try to fix this real quick before we continue on. Let's maybe there's something going on here. Okay. This might fix the problem. So, what is going on here? Well, it's the same garbage. Oh, the race is neck and neck, and the fate of the free world all depends on your vote. This is why they do this. They want to make sure that they get the consent of the people. And those that feel like they lost the election will go ahead and say, oh, well, I guess the majority of America chose this, so we got to go along with that. Now, let's keep going here. What else is going on? Look, everybody knows. As many people out there are so still deceived and into the right-left paradigm, thinking that voting actually matters. Even at that, everybody knows, as bad as Trump is, that this race isn't even close. Everybody knows that. Yet, this is what they have everybody believing. Now, in our very free and democratic society, when I say that facetiously, this very, very important election, they've decided to turn the comments off for most of the live coverage. I don't know if you guys caught the live coverage here on YouTube. I did. I just pulled up the first search that came up. And apparently, in this very important election, your opinion doesn't matter because the comments were turned off for the live coverage. While we had to watch the pre-debate coverage where it was all about football setup questions to shape a narrative. What was the narrative? Well, you all know. The narrative was to show Trump as crazy. And he pretty much did that for himself. That was all by design because all of the free-thinking people have been forced under his banner. Controlled demolition of Trump. Now, I'll get into the specifics of this. He talked about people eating cats, which I'm not saying that doesn't happen, but why would you bring that up in a debate? Why would you do that unless you were intentionally trying to discredit yourself? So, welcome to Free America, where your comments and opinions have no place in the American debate between two candidates that they want you to vote for. Wow. It says it all, doesn't it? In our discussion later about today's date, we'll say it all as well, because you're not allowed to talk about that unless we can put a disclaimer under your video. Welcome to Free America. Now, we're going to get into some very specific parts of the debate. I'm not going to show you the clips because in a free America, and when we're supposed to be in this free democratic process, I'm not sure if they're not going to dock this channel for using the footage. Copyright footage of our own tax-funded debate. Wow. Now, everything seemed scripted, to me anyway, before the debate ever even started. And then they were already framing Harris as stealing all of Trump's ideas. And believe it or not, that actually helps her. Because the psychological operation here is that this makes Harris not seem so bad if in fact she did win. Because she's going to do what Trump was going to do anyway. She stole all his ideas. Do you see how this works? It's reverse psychology. And when will we learn? Why do you think she's copying his style and his objectives? Because she wants to not seem so far left. So, what else is going on? Let's pull up the picture here. This is what we all had to look at last night. And I was up pretty late, just going really. So let's get into the specifics. They talked about the economy. Harris mentioned low-cost housing and helping the middle class, which sounds great, but who's going to pay for that? We don't need tax dollars thrown at these things. We need the system fixed that is causing unaffordable housing. The only way to fix that is to get rid and root out the corruption, to get rid and root out the inflated housing prices, to install some kind of regulation that matches up the jobs in an area with the kind of housing you can get. It's pretty simple. Now you might say, oh, that's a state thing. Government can't come in and tell you how many types of houses you can have based on the jobs that are available in an area. Well, you're probably right. Government shouldn't really tell people to do that, but we got to come up with something, you guys. What we don't need is a bunch of tax dollars going in a bottomless pit to give out free stuff. We don't need that. We need a system, whatever you call it. I know everyone believes in the American dream and just let everything fall where it may. But the problem is people are working hard and still can't afford housing. Now, we talked all about this. I'm not going to give you too much of my ideas, but I just want you to know that we've discussed all these solutions before. We've discussed them, haven't we, on this channel? So it's not just about complaining or nitpicking these candidates. We've come up with solutions. You have to match up with zoning the amount of housing, the housing inventory, with the local jobs within a 30-minute commute. If you don't do that, then you're going to have disparity. You're going to have people traveling long distances to go to work. You're going to have problems with that economy. You're going to have people shacking up 4, 5, 6, 10 to a house. You're going to have homeless people. It's 101. The jobs don't match the housing. You're going to have problems. It's super simple, right? Now, what else happened? Well, Trump talked about taking it to China with his tariffs, right? And Kamala countered by saying that these tariffs, these costs are being passed on the consumer in the form of higher prices. Even though Biden never eliminated the Trump tariffs, you see how they're all on the same side, bickering over nothing? Because if Biden didn't get rid of the tariffs, then Kamala Harris can't complain that the tariffs are raising the taxes. It's stupid. And we all know what's happening here. We all know. We are making China rich still. China had record profits during the pandemic when Trump was president because everyone was buying Walmart and Amazon products, 80 to 90% of which are Chinese. That's the truth about all this. And even though the tariffs went up, they still made a killing. If either of these candidates wanted to put their money where their mouth is, they would completely stop all Chinese products today. Executive order. Chop the head off of the snake. And guess what's left over? American products. So you go on Amazon and yeah, maybe there isn't as much of a selection, but guess what? Boom, you kickstart the economy because it's all American products. And then those businesses grow and then they can offer cheaper products after they've got 80% of the market share for a chainsaw instead of buying a Chinese chainsaw. I'm sorry, the frustration is there because these two people are idiots. And if a person like me that's not even that smart can figure this stuff out with common sense, and all of you can figure it out with common sense, then why are we having these debates? Who are these people? I don't like either of these people. Let me go back in the chat. I'm on a little bit of a rant today, but it's for good reason. Maybe this will help people wake up. Chop the head off the snake. We keep complaining about China, about their human rights abuses, but yet 80 to 90% of our products on Amazon and Walmart, where everybody shops, is Chinese. What are we doing? Okay, I'll calm down. Now, what else happened? I mean, this was like watching two cats chasing each other around a bush. They got nowhere. Now, Trump was on and on and on about the open border and how that was the reason why the economy was negatively affected. Now, I agree with him. That's part of it. But what he didn't talk about was the $6.6 trillion that he gave away to pharmaceutical companies and stimulus checks that kickstarted the inflation. And, you know, this is low-hanging fruit for Kamala Harris. She should have went right for it. She would have been like, Trump, you can't spend $6.6 trillion and expect there's going to be zero inflation. But yet, she won't bring that up, will she? Because they're all on the same side. Because if she brought that up, then they would have to admit all kinds of other stuff, right? Now, any economist will tell you, and these economists aren't doing their job, because they would have to admit that you can't just write checks for $6.6 trillion. I don't care if there's a pandemic going on. You can't do that without inflation. Yet none of these economists are talking about this. That was the largest expenditure in U.S. history. The largest expenditure in U.S. history. And no one's talking about it because they're all crazy and they think we're stupid. Now, if you tune into this show, you're going to actually learn something today instead of just listening to talking points and rhetoric. So share the show. This should help people wake up. Now, here's the funny part. Of course, Trump bragged about how he handled the pandemic, but curiously, he didn't mention that he created the vaccine this time. Remember, he was bragging about that? All of a sudden, it's missing, and it's very obvious. Starting to back the car out of the garage, isn't he? I mean, you guys, this was like watching two people chewing 100-year-old gum, the same gum over and over again. Now, most of the moderator questions seemed to be framed to go after Trump. And this was by design. Essentially, they were football questions for Kamala. She got a couple of tough questions, but most of them were attacking Trump. And of course, this is by design. This is to anger the right, so the people are up in arms and they say that was an unfair debate. Trump, they were attacking Trump. The moderators were attacking Trump, and they kind of were in their own little sweet way. They tried to be as nice as they could about it, but they were literally just volleying. All the questions were about Trump, pretty much, except for like 2 or 3. And, you know, they tell us that there was no notes allowed. Why can't you write notes down when someone's attacking you? You can write down at least the bullet points. That wasn't allowed. Okay. So that was also to make it seem unfair. But it was weird. It was almost like I looked at Kamala and it almost looked like she was reading off of something. I don't know if you guys got that as well. It definitely looked like at times they were both reading something. And I don't know what, but that's what it seemed like to me. Okay. Even though they said it wasn't allowed. Now, then they got into abortion, and both candidates seemed to focus on all the extreme and rare cases, all the extreme and rare circumstances that almost never happen. And Trump said the states and the people should decide. And I agree with him about that. But of course, Kamala, she's liberal, and she pretty much promised to undo everything that Trump did. Okay. Now, to me, Trump seemed to be the more polished of the two. Kamala had like a rough start. She kind of came in at the end. I was actually shocked. I'm like, okay, if there's no teleprompter, how did this woman go from, her platitudes of silliness to actually forming sentences? And she actually did put together some streams of thought and some memory recall that I was actually shocked. Now, of course, I would never vote for either of these people, especially not Harris, because she doesn't represent my values as a conservative person. And Trump's just a poser, in my opinion. But this is what they wanted people to believe, right? We're talking about what the masses are going to believe about this debate. And they'll probably come away thinking that Trump was a bully and that Kamala actually had some sense. This is what they wanted you to come away believing. Now, let's get into some of this other stuff. This cat story. This is probably going to be headline news today. Trump seemed to, at points, to intentionally try to sound like a crazy person. How? Well, he was focused on the people who came across the border and repeated a claim that there were certain groups of people eating people's pets, eating people's cats. Now, this is weird, right? Think about this for a second. It's the second mention that we've heard. I won't make you stare at their faces anymore. Some of you are probably disgusted. This is the second instance they've been talking. He talked about cats, isn't it? Remember, we lost by a whisker, and now people eating cats? What is this about? What is this whole cat thing about? Now, not to say that this isn't or might not be true, okay? Because he was quickly fact-checked on this, and their fact-check wasn't even a fact. They just said the local officials said there's nothing to substantiate that rumor. That's not a fact-check. That's another opinion. But not to say that this isn't true, but why would you focus on something like this during maybe your only debate? Why would you even bring that up when there's so many other ways to dismantle the left-wing agenda? Why would you bring that up? Now, I can tell you, as a matter of fact, because I saw this with my own eyes, that some people, some groups of people, you could call them races or whatever, they do eat cats and dogs. Okay, I experienced this personally growing up. I was 9 years old. My cat Blackie went missing. So my friends and I got on our bikes. We rode next door to the cul-de-sac. I used to live on Stacy Court in Stockton, California, off of Wadman Lane. Now I can tell you because I don't live there anymore. And next door, there was a cul-de-sac. There was two cul-de-sacs, like a pair of cul-de-sacs off Wadman, Stacy Court. And we went to go look for Blackie the cat. And what did we find? The garage was open, and trigger warning here, because I know a lot of you love cats, and I love cats, so this was very disturbing for me as a child. There was Blackie hanging half-skinned from the inside of a garage. There's nothing we could do. He was already gone, and I was 9 years old. What was I going to do? And this is what happens when you quickly allow so many cultures into American communities without establishing clear customs and norms and rules. People end up having their pets eaten. This is real. Now, what was the circumstances under which this happened with my experience? Well, during the early 80s, when I was like 9, America was housing asylum seekers from Asia. Vietnam, Laos. Oh boy, having issues. Now, what else is going on? Well, Trump seemed to keep hitting the border. He was obsessed with the borders, kept talking about it over and over again, so much so that he made some really good points. You almost felt compelled to vote for him just for that one issue. Because you actually believe in his promise that he would literally deport every illegal alien. You guys, that's not going to happen. Mark my words. I want it to happen, but it will not happen. Not the way Trump wants to do it, not the way he's planning on doing it. There's no way he could get that done under his plan. I mean, talk about civil unrest. You guys, he's talking about mass deportation. He's talking about door to door. He's talking about the National Guard. That is a surefire way to start race wars and everything. Because look, it's not just the illegals that they're going to be deporting and messing with. They're going to come to your door and say, are you harboring any illegals? We're going to do a search. Your civil rights will be all trampled on. This is what they want. Now, I gave a plan, and I'll give it to you again real quick so you know I'm not just complaining. My plan was to give a 2-year window and deport humanely and deport by attrition. How do you do that? You give a 2-year window where all benefits to illegals will be eliminated. Every single one. Healthcare, driver's licenses, support, aid, education. You pass an executive order that forces the states to withdraw every single illegal benefit. Then you make it a capital offense to harbor an illegal, hire them. And guess what? You give them a 2-year window so that nobody's angry when the 2 years is up and everything's gone. What are they going to say then? You had 2 years to get your act in order and you still got the benefits for the 2 years. Everything gets cut off, and then you police anyone who's going past the 2 years. You can sue the states who refuse. You guys, this is so easy to stop the immigration. No one's going to come here if they know that they can't get a job and they're just going to die. They're just going to turn around and go home. Why is this so difficult? Because they want it to be difficult. They want you angry that the border problem isn't solved. Executive order, day one, national security. Cut off all benefits to illegals. Now, if you think this is radical, what's the alternative? The alternative is door to door, National Guard, deport immediately. Talk about violence. You guys, that doesn't make any sense. He's doing that on, and he knows it doesn't make any sense, but he's saying it because it sounds good. It sounds like he's going to take action. Couldn't he get way more votes by saying, hey guys, we have a plan. The plan is Casey's plan. Enter the stars plan. We cut off illegals. We give them 2 years. And then like everything I just said, I'm not going to repeat the whole thing. And then everyone goes, you know what? That's sensible. Wow, that's a great plan. We can all get on board with that. But he won't do that. He's playing to the right. He's playing for violence. He's playing for anger. He's feeding into it so that you vote for him. Well, if they cut off benefits and steal for us, guess what, Mama Rogers? Then the police do their job. Chase them down. Look, how long can they go? How long can illegal go without putting gas in their car or driving? They're going to get pulled over. They're going to run out of gas. It's simple. It's so simple it hurts. But no one will do it because they don't want to fix the problem. They want it to be a political football. They want this. Now, okay, let me take a deep breath. Now, they brought up this whole Trump losing by a whisker thing. And what did Trump say? What was his response? Oh, that was just a joke. I was being sarcastic. So here we go again. Now he's doubling down on believing that the election was stolen from him, which of course it was. He was far more popular. But it doesn't matter because this is all just a TV show with clowns, right? Now, Trump did bring up another good point that at this point in American history, with all the technology that we have, we should have a foolproof voting system. Okay? I'm sorry. There's no more excuses. But again, will that ever happen? No. Because they need this instability. They thrive on it to keep the drama going, to keep you showing up and to keep your feelings invested in all this. Now, they did bring up Israel and Hamas, yet we keep giving them billions of dollars. You guys, the war stops when we defund or threaten to defund Israel. That's when the war stops. Now, Trump said that this war would have never started under his presidency. I have a magic wand. Things don't happen with me because I'm Superman. It's ridiculous. How do you know the war wouldn't have started under your presidency? You have some special powers? Now, he ran all kinds of cover for Israel. He wanted to seem strong on Israel. And then Kamal said, I love Israel too. So there's your answer. Who can prove that they love Israel the most? Which is why both sides keep sending money no matter what Israel does. Now, then they brought up the Ukraine. Millions dead. Millions. Now, Trump bragged again that he would end the war by making Europe pay their share of the war costs. Okay, money solves everything, right? And he'd get them all in a room and talk about it. I'll end the war tomorrow. And then Kamala bragged about everything she did to help Zelensky. It's just silly on its face. Now, I could barely get through this debate because it was so empty and pointless. And Trump said, now let's get into Obamacare. This was funny. The way they spin this stuff is hilarious. Trump says he's going to keep Obamacare and that he saved it in his last administration. He goes, I took something bad and horrible and I saved it. And if reelected, he said that he would replace it once they found something better. Again, no, national health care is good health care. Get rid of it. Get rid of the insurance companies. Allow people to have their own personal account. It's like Social Security, but it goes into your account that you have power over, not some big, huge pot that the government has power over. It's a secure bank account with your name on it. And from the age that you start working, you start paying 5% of your check into your own health care. And if you have a catastrophic event you borrow against, that's where the government helps and you pay it back interest free. Because we do live in America. And that should be the case. And some people are going to stay healthy their majority of their lives. And by the time they're 50, they will have very little money spent out of their account. And then when you get to a certain age, they start giving you some of that money back if you pass certain thresholds of health. It's simple. Let's say, okay, let me give you an example. I'm 51 years old. I've never had a broken bone. I did have a surgery or two. I had health insurance at that time for cat scratch fever. You could say that I'd probably have $250,000 in my medical savings account if I had put away 5% of my check since I was working at McDonald's at 15 years old. Now, if I have to go to the hospital, guess what? Because there are no longer any insurance companies, the cost of things comes down to a reasonable and real rate. In other words, it's not $100,000 if you're in the hospital for 3 days. Right? Now it's more like $15,000 or $20,000. It's no longer inflated costs because you've taken out the middleman, which is the insurance companies. So, let's say I do get an appendix that I need removed. They dip into my $250 savings account, $1,000 savings account, and it costs $10,000 or $5,000 to get my appendix removed because that's all it should really cost, right? You pay the anesthesiologist. He's only in there for 10, 15, 20 minutes. You give him $2,000, $3,000. You pay the surgeon who's in there for 10 or 15 minutes. You pay him $2,000 or $3,000. It's a freaking appendix. And then you pay the hospital $2,000 or $3,000 and you're out the door for $6,000 for an appendix. Let's say I reach 60 years old. And now I've got $300,000 in my health savings account. Guess what? Now they start paying me back a check, $500 a month. Casey, stay healthy. Stay healthy. Hey, you're getting $500 a month of your money back. And then guess what? Let's say I die and I'm 90. I really hope to live to be 100. I feel great. Let's say I'm 100 and I die and I've got $500,000 in my health savings account. That should be rolled over to my children so they can start building their own health future security. What's wrong with that idea? Then guess what? Everyone's healthy. Then guess what? There's an incentive. There's an incentive for you to stay healthy because it's your money you're paying in. And you don't want to dip into that. And you know you're going to get some of that money back before you die. I mean, am I right or wrong, you guys? Am I right or wrong? Now, I didn't read this anywhere. This is common sense. Common sense. I don't smoke anything, Troy Walker. And that's called an ad hom attack. So be careful with that. That's not allowed on this channel. It's disruptive, divisive, and distracting. Now, let's keep going here. Now, Kamala comes back and she says Trump actually tried to get rid of the Affordable Health Care Act 60 times during his presidency. And she bragged about all this stuff. Again, no American citizen should be forced to carry their health care, especially at the expense that it is now. We should be able to come up with our own health care. Now, then they talked about climate change and Trump agreeing with us that it's a hoax. Most of us agree that. And Kamala believing that American homeowners have lost their insurance coverage. She thinks it's because of climate change. So there was that. Now, Trump was all offense and Kamala brought more of a touchy-feely game to the whole thing, pretending that she knows the common people. She kept saying, I grew up middle class. So, wow. So that was the debate. I'll leave it at that. Now, I promised to look into this whole school shooting threat that was made. And apparently, this was a thing that happened across several states, not just my locality. Let's read about what happened. I found a couple stories on this. Thank you for your patience. This was a story. Thank you for your patience and understanding as we work through the social media threat situation. Now, this happened apparently in Tennessee as well. This, to me, was a psyop. I got some pictures here of what happened. I don't know if it happened in any other states, but I heard for sure that it happened in Tennessee, almost the same exact threat. I've told our families before that while I am an educator, I'm also a parent. And so when situations like this arise, I look at things through multiple lenses. This is from a school administrator here locally. We all had difficult decisions to make this morning when it came to student attendance. While I'm confident that our students on campus are safe today, I do understand those who want more information before sending their children to school. At this time, I do not know how much information we will learn throughout the day, but I confidently say that local law enforcement, state police, and the FBI are all involved and are taking this very seriously. You have likely seen similar stories from around the country today. And so, of course, it is possible that this is just some sort of hoax. So they admit that here. The school administrator admits that this has been happening across the country. I think it's our own government. And look at this. What happened? A text went out with a gun saying that this local area was going to get some smoke. And they literally named the county. So they're not sure what this is, some sort of mass hoax or what, but there's something afoot here, isn't there? So I promise you I'd follow up on that. Okay, so what else is going on? Now, one of you mentioned related to this story. In the comments yesterday, let me go in here because I want to get your guys' feedback. One of you mentioned in the comments yesterday that your school district was talking about the very same thing. And you were also saying that they were talking about phones, students' phones. Now, this is weird because you mentioned that they were talking about taking away students' phones. And it was all seemed to be lumped in with this PSYOP. And I was like, whoa, that was exactly what they were talking about at the meeting with these random school administrators. They were literally linking this situation to being on the cusp of taking away students' phones in schools. Now, the two seem completely unrelated, but this is what they decided to bring up. They were talking about the same thing that you were hearing at your school. Now, did any of you guys hear about this? Are they threatening to take your children's phones from school? And when did you start hearing about this? This is important, so please pay attention. When did you start hearing about them talking about restricting cell phone use at children's schools? Now, here's the sentiment that I got from the administrators. They were peeved, literally irritated, that parents had the gall to be checking in on their kids through the cell phone throughout the day. Last I checked, that would make a great parent, right? Hey, Judy, you're on your way to third period? Yes, Mom, I'm fine. Okay, I love you. Thanks, Mom, love you too. Bye. That would make a great parent, wouldn't it? But the school administrators were irritated by that. They felt that the children were distracted. And at one point, one of the administrators were mocking the parents. They're like, some parents, they're calling their kid all day. Why do they have to call him so much? I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe what I was hearing, you guys. Almost like they were jealous or in competition with the parents. Shouldn't the teachers be encouraging children to communicate with their parents? Spooky. Spooky. Thanks, Troy. So, have any of you heard anything about all this, specifically related to this threat that went out a few days ago? Because that way we can see that there's a pattern, right? We can see that they are going now after severing our communication with our children while they're in school. And you know what that would do? That would mean they could get away with whatever they wanted. That would mean that they could get away with whatever they wanted, whatever situations. You know, here's the problem. Here's the problem with all this. Okay, so listen to this. So let me give you a little bit more insight into this discussion, because this is very, very, very important. Now, I came in at the tail end of this meeting, I'll admit, and I had to ask a few questions to get up to speed. It was a room full of local people. And I said, hey, have you guys thought about putting a marshal in the school or arming a teacher who has some military experience? That'd be the quickest way to take out a threat, or, you know, a child who has no experience with guns or very little compared to a veteran who's been in a wartime situation. I would think that the veteran would be able to handle himself, right? Well, guess what? They're like, well, you know, we've talked about that, but these students are so mean. They're so mean. Like, what if the teacher snaps and just kills everybody? And then we got a different situation. I'm like, what kind of scenario is that? Are you serious? Oh, teacher's going to shoot the students because they're angry because the students mocked them, and so we shouldn't have the teachers carry guns? Well, I thought the teachers were adults. I thought you're supposed to be able to absorb all that stuff. But these were the excuses that the administrators were giving. And then they're like, ooh, same with the veteran. That's scary. Veterans are scary. Like, ooh. I'm like, are you kidding? That'd be a dream job for a veteran, to actually do something real. I mean, not real. I don't want to discredit or minimize veterans' sacrifice, because a lot of them were just deceived into working for the cabal, working for the corporations. They didn't know. But what better way to redeem yourself as a veteran than to protect children? Right? It was almost like the school administrator was told, we don't want to go there because it's going to interfere with our operations. We don't want to have these rogue, people on the campus. We need to do this. It was almost like that. I got like that kind of feeling when she shut down the idea of having a school marshal, a veteran. And then you couple that with severing communication between the parent. Can you imagine a parent not being able to get a hold of their child when something like this is happening? Oh, but the school administrator was like, oh, they don't need their parent in that situation. They need to be focused on us as a school administrator so we can get them out of the situation. How are you going to get them out of the situation when you don't have a gun? How are you going to get those children out of that situation? Right? I don't know. You guys, we live in clown world. This is crazy. It's crazy. Now, let's get into this discussion about 9/11. I should probably broke this up into several sections. Today is a day that went down in infamy. In 2001, an entire generation is now unaware of what we who are older experienced and went through in the wake of the event. We're going to call it the event. And for the sake of this video remaining uncensored, I'm going to use the code words blind 11 when referring to this day. For the rest of the show, I'm going to do that. I want to avoid getting a banner underneath our channel, underneath this video, because that marks us and makes it so it doesn't get circulated. Now, I've got all kinds of tabs pulled up. Like I said, I probably should have broke this up into 2 shows, but we're going to go for it today. There are many factions of truth about what happened on this day, 23 years ago. Anywhere from some people believe nobody died. Some people believe there were no planes. Some people believe there were energy weapons which dustified the towers. Some believe there were thermite bombs placed on the towers. And truth channels still debate also under who actually carried this out. Some say it was an inside job. Others say it was a particular country. And I believe it is healthy to debate these things. But we should never be accusing other factions and other belief systems of intentionally disinforming the public or dismissing another faction because of whatever evidence we think we have. We're not here to debate any of that today. Okay? Just the fact that people don't believe the official story should be what's most important. And then from there, we can get down to the bottom of that. But we're not going to talk about any of those topics today. I'm here today to simply focus on some of the more esoteric and spiritual symbolism surrounding the event, rather than any theories about who did it or how it was done. As it sits right now on today, there are 88 lights shining up in the sky from the footprint of the former towers. The 88 lights are xenon lights, which is one of the clues that we will be focusing on today. Now, why 88 xenon lights, you might ask? Well, very few people remember that each of the towers had beveled edges. The edges were snipped off, making each tower have 8 sides. So 8 and 8 is the 88, but 88 carries a lot of other spiritual significance. It's a portal number or a time travel number. If you don't believe this right now, by the end of today's show, you're going to understand that some gate was opened during this event. Portals are real, and most portals require sacrifice. Now, what we do know is that the building that replaced the 2 buildings was another 8. The S8 molecule. Let me show that to you. This is it right here. Sulfur, the S8 molecule. And they say right here that the new building that replaced the 2 is an antiprism. This is the one world center, we'll have to call it, shaped like an antiprism. This is the shape. The square antiprism, the shape of the new tower. Here's the octa-sulfur molecule, an antiprism. It's the same thing. A crown. So what does all this mean? Well, not only is it an S8 molecule, a sulfur molecule, that's another 8, it's also, the new Freedom Tower is 888 plus 888 feet tall. 1,776 feet tall, which is 888 plus 888. So there's a bunch of 8s. Do you still think this wasn't a portal? Do I have your attention? Because the spiritual esoterics of this event mean everything. And it should not be dismissed as crazy. Now, what other confirmation do we have? Well, what other confirmation do we have of foreknowledge? What other confirmation do we have? Well, this is the Secretariat building at the United Nations, built a long time ago. And I'll put a link to this, and you can count for yourself. There are 9 courses of windows between the gray windows, then 11, and then 10, which would be 01, the year that they fell, encoded right into the architecture of the Secretariat building of the United Nations. And as I've shown you in previous buildings, this site also looks like a 1, 1, and a 9 from the air in Google Earth. All you have to do is go into Google Earth and look, and you'll see the 1, the 1, and the 9, which is the 9, the 1 in reverse. It's a mirror, isn't it? In fact, all of the streets in Manhattan are aligned to 119 degrees. Long before this event ever happened. What other clues do we have that something is not what it seems? Well, this is the facade of the former towers. And as you can count here, there are 19, exactly 19 tridents. Let me make this a little bit bigger if I can. For those that want to count, double check my work. Totally fine. I've already done all this. See the tridents on the facade? There are 19. 19. What's that about? Oh, well, there ended up being 19 hijackers, we were told, right? Now, each of these tridents has 3 prongs. So you can either count all the vertical lines on your screen, or you can just say, okay, there's 19 tridents times 3 for a total of 57. And these prongs of the trident reach all the way to the top of the 110 stories. Now, there is some other esoteric stuff related into, electricity. 110 used to be the voltage for an outlet, and 220 was the voltage for heavier current for clothes dryers and stuff like that. And so you had 2 of these things. So 110 and 220 was literally like an electrical signal almost. Both were 110 stories tall. Now, interestingly, there are very few pictures showing the entire facade of the towers. You usually see a portion or part of it, or it's at some angle where you can't count them. But this particular image shows you the truth. And the lack of images shows you that they're trying to hide the numerics behind this building. Now, if you didn't know, there were 19 years between Blind 11 and COVID-19. Now, Let me check in with you and we'll get into more of the esoterics behind this and why they chose the date of Blind 11 as the date. Now I want to introduce you to a particular individual. This is Michael Richards. And Michael knew something. He was a sculptor, and he died in one of the buildings on Blind 11. But before he died, he made this sculpture. What did he sculpt? A man with airplanes flying into him. A man with airplanes flying into him. It's like he knew. Because each of the towers represented a man. And I'll explain that a little bit later, but I ran this guy's numbers into the calculator to see exactly how long Michael lived. How long did Michael live? Look at all the 88s. He lived 1,988 weeks. Let me make this a little bigger so you can see this, because this is a record, an esoteric record. Michael lived 1,988 weeks. He lived 1,202,688 seconds. And look at the number of minutes. 20,044,000. 2 times 44 is 88. 800 minutes. Now, Casey, that's just an accident. Well, what about these xenon lights? These shining up into the sky every blind 11. Is there any significance to that? Yes, there is. XE is the periodic symbol for xenon. And there's that old X again, isn't there? The X is about the crossing over. Now, what does xenon mean? It means stranger. It means stranger. Stranger to what? It's something that's unnatural. Now, we're going to come back to that, but keep that fresh in your mind. The X factor. Now, understand that the halfway point between the opening of the towers in 1973 and when they fell in 2001, the halfway point exactly was the year 1987. Now let's get into a discussion about Building 7, because Building 7 is the key, it is the linchpin, it is the secret code to understand foreknowledge of this event. Because in that year, the exact halfway point was when Building 7 opened. The 14th year out of the 28 total years. Now, I know that they started building the buildings in 1968, and it was 33 years from the start of the building until the end. But when they officially opened was 1973. They stood for 28 years after the official opening. Important to get all this straight. Now, halfway through, Building 7 opened. Well, how many stories was Building 7? 47 stories. And it opened in the Hebrew year 47. So it was like they knew. They built the building to commemorate 1987, which is the Hebrew year 5747 in their calendar. Notice that number 57 again. Remember, the 19 tridents times 3 is 57. So, 1987 was the crossover point. It was the zenith or xenon. Is this all making sense now? The X, the crossing. Now, xenon is one of the only elements that starts with the letter X. And Building 7 was a trapezoid building. Now, how did they know that 14 years after Building 7 opened that the towers were going to fall? Because there had to have been foreknowledge. And this all brings us to the more spiritual aspects of the two towers and Building 7. I want you to think of those three buildings as a group, because this was all about the destruction of man and bringing out the X, or the crossover of man. X out the man and bring in something else, something strange, something unnatural. Now, remember the falling people? Remember all that fell? Well, that was symbolic. Because Christ essentially fell to earth to save us, didn't he? And I believe that it was him who spiritually represented Building 7. He was the one in the middle, and at each of his side was the thieves, Buildings 1 and 2. And a lot of money was stolen that day, a lot of thieves, weren't they? And when Jesus and the two thieves were brought down in their place, in their footprint, a new man was built, wasn't it? Salvation through Christ. But the dark side of this was a new man built in the image of sulfur, which is right next to phosphorus on the periodic table, which is Lucifer. The sulfur man, the Lucifer man, the one trade center. Crowned with the anti-prism symbolism. Crowned Lucifer. Let's go back to Xenon, because I found a bunch of stuff about Xenon. I told you this was going to be a show to remember and a show to share, because these are the things that help people wake up from the spiritual. And this will drive it all home for you guys. Xenon is what is called a heavy gas. In fact, it is the polar opposite of helium. Helium makes your voice higher. Well, guess what Xenon does? Xenon makes your voice much lower. It probably gives you a demon voice, in fact. And I looked all this up, and apparently when you fill a balloon with Xenon, it will drop like a rock to the floor. That's how heavy Xenon is. Remember all the helium decodes we did? People are like, why are you talking about helium? That's ridiculous. Balloons, helium, Casey, you're crazy. Apparently I'm not. Because helium is the opposite of Xenon. Helium above, Xenon below. One makes your voice higher, one makes your voice deeper. One makes you lightheaded, the other one is used as an anesthetic. I'll put links to all this. As above, so below. From the towers to the pit. Now, there's other weird stuff about Xenon. It's actually soluble in blood, and it easily crosses the blood-brain barrier, which is why it is a powerful anesthetic. They say here that Xenon originates out of mineral springs, and it has a purplish blue color, which of course is red and blue mixed together. It's the crossover. It's the stranger. Red and blue make purple. It's almost as though Xenon represents the mixing of the two trees, which is exactly what they replaced the Twin Towers with. The two trees mixed together into the one Freedom Tower, so that they can make a new man, a purple man. Wow. Now, that covers just about all the esoteric elements surrounding the towers and Blind 11, except for one. from the tower to the pit, the bottomless pit, this bizarre memorial fountain that resembles a submerged black cube with water flowing into nowhere. Now, I believe that the memorial is the portal from which they will rise. According to the book of Enoch, they will be resurrected to judgment from the hot springs of earth, it says in the book of Enoch. And when that happens, the hot springs will become cold. And this is how we will all know that the end is nigh. Guess what angle this bottomless pit is angled at? Just to confirm it all, you can double check this in Google Earth. All you got to do is go there, draw a line. It's exactly 119 degrees. Now let's summarize some of this before we move on. Spiritually, this event was an act of defiance and mass human sacrifice against God's coming kingdom. The serpent was crowned as the ruler of the fallen world. And there was a pledge made by the enemy to recreate man in his image so that there would be no flesh left. God says he'll cut these days short because there will be no flesh left. So, no fear, no need for fear, but this is the truth about all this. But in addition to the towers being metaphors for the man, there's also metaphors for the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, which is why the crucifixion happened the way it did, because it was symbolic. Jesus was destroying the tree of the knowledge of good and evil at the crucifixion. That was part of it. We're trapped in the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And Jesus said, you can get out of this. You go through me. I'm the portal. We're in a dimension trap. A dimension trap. So, the enemy, this is his symbolism. He also destroyed the dimension trap, or he thinks he did. Torn down by the enemy through what? Through sacrifice. He thinks if he takes out enough flesh, he can escape this matrix and rebuild his own kingdom here on earth. But the Bible says their kingdom is built on sinking sand, not the rock of Jesus Christ. What is the devil's kingdom? His kingdom is where the right and the left are one. Hence, the anti-prism. Hence, the two buildings smashed into one, right? Two towers smashed together. It's you and I who can't seem to figure all this out yet. I mean, you guys can, but humanity in general, they don't understand. This is why everyone's like, oh, you have to vote. Vote for Trump. They're all the same. We just don't know it yet. So, 23 years and here we are. Will people wake up? I hope so. Now, what else do we have? This here is one of the most amazing discoveries that was revealed to us, gifted to us by the Holy Spirit. This might help some people wake up. This is the Flight 93 Memorial in Pennsylvania. This red line here in the bottom, let's make this a little bit bigger for you guys. The horizontal red line in the bottom is exactly the halfway point between these two. I don't think it's going to get any bigger, you guys. Between these two elements where the circle cuts off at the bottom. So I measured the distance with the ruler and I went exactly halfway, and that's the corner you see there. Then I drew a vertical line from that, and it just so happens that when you do that, and anyone can do this in Google Earth, when you do that, that line perfectly dissects this half circle, this semicircle, this bubble circle, whatever you want to call it. It perfectly dissects it. In other words, there's the same exact amount of area in this sector as there is in this sector. Now, the odds of this happening are 1 in trillions, but here it is. Where do you think this perpendicular vertical line points to? Because all I did was extend the line. This is a 90-degree angle. This is simple geometry, you guys. Where do you think the line points? Let's go into the chat and see where you guys think the line points. Now, if you saw the video of this that we did years ago, I think 2013 is when we probably discovered this, then please give other people a chance maybe to come up with the answer. All I did was drag this vertical line from the exact center of this circle across the world to see where it pointed to. Now it can only point and intersect with a set amount of other points. A lot of the points will fall to the left of it. A lot of points will fall to the right of it. So anything that falls on the line, it's as if it's pointing to it. Let's go into the chat and see who gets the answer. I got a couple more things and then show will be over today. Where do you think the line points? All right. Good morning. Okay, who knows the answer? Okay. Who knows the answer? Where does the line point? Just take a wild guess. Remember, that was the memorial in Pennsylvania for the people that supposedly rammed into the earth. Shanksville, yes. Thanks, Troy. Where do you think it points? Remember, you can't just draw that line anywhere. The minute you move it to the right or to the left, it's not going to completely equal the other side of the circle. Yes, it's a crescent moon. That's a good clue. That'll be your clue. Nope, not the Vatican, not CERN. Let's see here. To the new tower. Nope. Take a wild guess. Not the Pentagon. 66 para. Nope, nope. Okay, I'm just going to show you. Rebecca probably knows the answer, but she's opting out because she doesn't want to give it away. Here we go. I got this on video for those that are skeptical. Here we go. Let's play the video. So, the crescent moon memorial points to the black cube at Mecca. And look, there's another crescent in front of the black cube. What is going on here? Now, when you combine that with the fact that the infinity pool memorial at the actual site also looks like a black cube under the ground, something's wrong here, isn't there? Now, you can do this yourself in Google Earth. Anybody that naysays this or says I'm crazy, you're just going to get blocked from the channel because that's just distracting when all you got to do is prove it to yourself by going into Google Earth and doing it. I'm not going to allow disinformation on the channel. You can see, and anyone that says, oh, that line can point anywhere, that's getting deleted as well because the line can't just point anywhere. It only intersects with a set amount of points. In other words, there's certain cities that the line will go through, but you can't just draw the line anywhere because the line points based on dissecting the semicircle. It's geometry. And if you don't understand that, I'm sorry, but that's the truth. Now, some of you are hearing this for the first time or maybe the second because they don't want people to know this. This should have been a viral discovery. Millions of people should have watched the video that we did on this, but this is how they hide the truth. Did you hear this from anybody about this memorial that it points to Mecca? Was this announced on the news? No, it wasn't. You're hearing it here. Alternative media. So, why this specific date of blind 11? Why this date? Why did they choose this, you might be asking, to perform this ritual? Well, if you didn't know this, in certain calendars, the Ethiopian calendar, for instance, their new year begins on blind 11. And many believe, including myself, that Jesus was born on today's date. So, if a person's born today, when were they conceived? When did the sperm meet the egg? Now, in Jesus' case, it might have been a spiritual or was a spiritual conception when the sperm met the egg and for the child to be born on today. But if you back this out 38 weeks from today's birth, it puts you smack dab on Christmas Day, very near the winter solstice. Now, this is strange because the Antichrist claims that Christmas is his birthday, putting his conception date, the Antichrist, 38 weeks before Christmas. So here we have two dates, conception and birth, that all pivot around Christmas. One born on that day and the other conceived on that day. The false gods Apollo, Dionysus, born on Christmas, while Jesus, the true God, was conceived on that day. Now, what are the odds of that? What are the odds of that? It makes sense, right? Opposites of one another, Christ, Antichrist, mirror opposites. So their birthdays are mirror opposites. It makes perfect sense. Now, I want to end today's show with this. This will blow your mind. Casey, Xenon, what are you on about Xenon? That's ridiculous. Come on. That's just some random lights they chose. Stop stretching stuff and making things up. This is a 2021 study in which they used xenon gas to open the airways of a person with COVID-19. Let's read this abstract. Acute respiratory distress syndrome is the main danger to the life of patients with pneumonia caused by SARS-CoV. At the same time, respiratory failure after ARDS can persist for a long time. So this is like long COVID, despite intensive therapy. Therefore, it is important to develop new, effective approaches for restoring the ventilation function of the lungs. After COVID-19, here we present a case report of effective application of short-term inhalations of xenon oxygen mixture for treatment of respiratory failure and neuropsychiatric disorders associated with COVID-19. The patient inhaled a gas mixture of 70% xenon, 30% oxygen. They used multi-spiral computed tomography, evaluated psychometry, studied hematological and biochemical blood parameters, and applied some other methods of clinical studies to assess the therapeutic effectiveness of xenon inhalation. Although we studied the mechanism of action of xenon with computer modeling, the clinical case showed the high efficacy of xenon mixture for treating severe respiratory failure. Xenon inhalations dramatically increased oxygen saturation and the degree of pneumatization of the lungs, which means the amount of oxygen that they can absorb. We found out that in coronavirus pneumonia, saturated phospholipids of surfactant are transferred to this solid ordered phase, which disrupts the surface tension of the alveoli and alveolar gas exchange. So, the gas opens up your lungs. Using molecular modeling methods, we demonstrated the xenon atom increases the distance between the acyl chains of phospholipids due to the van der Waals dispersion interaction. These changes allow for the phase transition of the phospholipid. Okay, this is all just gobbledygook to most people. But just know that they literally took xenon gas and it performed so well that it might have even performed better. Well, can't say that. Can't make claims, but, pick whatever you want, ventilator or xenon gas. Now, what are the odds that those two things are connected? 19 years apart, 9/11 to COVID-19. We cannot assume that they're not connected. It's obvious. It's obvious. All right, I'm back in the chat. That was the show today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you woke up. I hope you share this video because it does no good if we're the only ones watching it, right? Because I know all you guys understand all this stuff, but we have to wake people up. We have to wake people up. Now, there is such a thing as sharing. When you go to share the video, you can put the timestamp on it. So even though we covered 3 or 4 different things, when you hit the share button, it'll say, do you want to share it at this timestamp? You hit the little checkbox, and it'll just bring the person to that portion of the show. Okay. If you're worried about other topics that we talked about today. Whoa, that was a marathon. So I'm back in the chat, you guys. 19 tridents. Can't make this up. Now, we had covered a lot of this over the years, but I thought we would put it all together in one show. I was going to just do a re-upload today, but it would have not done this justice. You know, it would have not done it justice. All right. Okay. What else is going on here, you guys? Yes, tree branches and leaves are lung symbolism. Absolutely. All right. Well, I'm going to let you guys go. Love each and every one of you. I'll see you tomorrow. I'm still working on Continuum, the TV series. I'm almost done with season 3. Got a lot more clips to show you, more off the chain symbolism. So hopefully I'll put together a show for you today and have that for you tomorrow morning, first thing in the morning. If you're new to the channel, we do go live every single day, first thing in the morning, 7:30 Central Time, United States, for about 30 minutes to an hour, typically, or the length of the shows. And the only day we don't upload usually anything is on Saturday. But we're here every single morning. YouTube is not going to give you a notification because this channel is being censored. So just show up at the same time every day and you'll catch all the shows. I love each and every one of you. Have a great rest of your day. Take care and be safe, you guys.